Hi, everyone. It's Deb Mishima here. We are now going to do the third in the Little Spring Things series. This one is called Welcome Y'all. It's the cow, it's got the little daisies, and it's got this little bee tag. So we can just get started. So as you can see, I've already base coated the piece. I've done the background. So now we're going to actually start with the daisies, and I'm going to take, these are done exactly the same way as the larger ones. These ones are just smaller. So I'm going to take my Snow White, and I'm going to take my round. This is my number 8 round. Going to get it nice and wet. Tap it off. Just make sure there's no water left on the ferrule. And then I'm just going to load my brush. Just pull the paint into it and make sure you bring it to a nice point. Now these are semi-transparent, so you want a little bit more water than you would normally use. Now I'm just going to start over here, and I'm going to start with a point, splay it out, and bring it back to a point. And I'm just going to do a few petals. Like that. And I'm just going to do that with all 3 of them. Make sure you refresh the water in your brush so that it isn't too opaque. And then we're going to do this top one here. Make sure when you splay it out, the bristles out, that you bring it back up to a nice point. And if you see any places you might want to add some, you can. Just to fill it in a little bit. And you can add a little bit more of the Snow White just to highlight them. You don't want to highlight all of them, but you might like to highlight a few of them. Now we just want those to dry. So I'm just going to take my 18-aught liner from Jo Sonia. I'm going to dip it in water, get it good and wet, tap it off, and then I'm going to go back into my Snow White, load my brush up, bring it to a nice point. I'm just going to add a few vein lines to these daisies. You can start from the bottom or the top, it doesn't matter, but try and always pull your brush towards you. You can see I brought some of the daisy petals right up into the base a bit, and that's fine because we're going to be doing some shading all through them and adding galaxy glitter. And you'll see it's just, they look so adorable when they're done. Okay, So these daisies, that's all we're going to do with the daisy petals right now. We're going to go up into the daisies themselves, and we're going to use burnt sienna, heritage brick, and moon yellow. It is hiding from me. Here it is, and my moon yellow. So we're going to use these three. Now these are quite a bit smaller, these daisy centers. So I'm going to use my smaller angle brush. I'm going to use my 1/4 inch Josonia angle. So I'm going to get it nice and wet, cap it off, and then I'm going to drag my brush down the ferrule onto the paper towel just till it hits the heel. You do it on the other side too. This will take the excess water off the ferrule and also away from the heel, but leave most of the moisture up at the end. So I'm going to take my burnt sienna and I'm just going to work it into the brush. And if you think you have too much water, I think that's a little bit too much. So I'm just going to take a little bit more off the heel. Load my brush. Then I'm going to paint these exactly the same way as I did the other daisies. I'm going to start just right at center and just down from the edge, and I'm going to walk it up. And then I'm going to wiggle my brush to the daisy petal bases up here. I'm going to do the same thing for each one. Again, I'm going to start just right at center, just in, walk it to the edge. And then I'm going to just wiggle my brush up into these petals. And I'm going to do the same thing for this top one. Just left it center, in from the edge, walk it out. Then I'm going to wiggle it just a little bit onto and in between the petals. Like that. So these three are done. You can take your mop brush and just mop that a little bit. Then we're going to take our moon yellow. I'm going to load the same brush with moon yellow. And I'm going to do just along the right side, again walking in to the edge. And this one, just along the right side, walk it in. Okay, now I'm going to go back into my heritage brick. And I'm going to load my brush, and we're just going to deepen that shading with some heritage brick. This really brightens the flower up. So I'm going to do it the same place that I've done the shading, just a little bit right of center, walk it up, and then wiggle it just along the bottom here and down into the petals a little bit, just where you're going to separate them. And then you can mop that just lightly. I'm going to do the same thing on this one, just right at center, walk it up to the top edge. And then down in between some of these petals. I usually have my beautiful sister here who helps me do all of these whenever I'm doing a class. So I'm watching to really make sure I do not go off screen here. Now I'm just going to do the same thing for this top one, a little bit right of center, walk it up to the edge, and then I'll wiggle it, wiggle your brush back and forth along the bottom, get some in between these petals a bit, and just there to the side. Okay, now I'm just going to mop that one off. Okay, now we're going to leave those petals for now, and we're going to go up to the cow. So the first thing we're going to do with the cow, you'll see how his shading is here. So after you've base coated, you can trace the details back on if you can't see them. And then just make sure his eyes and his nostrils are base coated. And then just on either side of the eye, show you the black of his eyes, it's white right here. So I am just going to make that white with the Snow White. So you can see, I'm just using my liner and I'm just filling that in with the white. Now it's just going to accentuate his eyes. I'm not going to worry if I've gotten a little bit on the black of the eyes because I can always touch that up. I'm just going to fill this in on either side. Okay. Now I still have a little bit of lamp black out from before, so I'm just going to touch up a little bit where I went onto his eyeball. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start shading. So first of all, we're going to shade fawn. So I'm going to get out my fawn. And I'm going to load up my my 3/8 inch Jo Sonja angle brush. Same way, I'm going to swish it in the water, get it really wet, tap it off, take my brush, go down the ferrule to the heel, again, go down the ferrule to the heel, take all the excess water off, and then I'm going to go into my fawn and load my brush. Now remember again, however it looks on here is how it's going to look on your piece. So if it doesn't look right here, it's not going to look right on your piece when you're painting. Okay, so I'm going to do fawn. And I'm going to go along the top of the ears. And again, I'm going to just start a little bit in from the edge, and I'm going to walk it to the edge. I'm doing this just so I don't get any paint ridge marks where the paint builds up. So I'm just going to mop this. And I'm going to do the other ear again, just along the top here. Mop it off. And then I'm going to do under this, there's a little line here, sort of like the inner ear, and this is the flap over. So I'm just going to do in between those. So just on the other underside of that line. So I'm going to go just on the underside of that line. Mop it off, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one. You notice again, I'm using short little strokes. I don't do one long line. And I'm going to add a little bit just along the top here, just in between the ears. So the top of this ear to the top of this ear. And I'm going to do above his eyelids. So just above them again. Walk them in. And on the other one too. I'm going to do above his muzzle, just in between the eyes. And then I'm going to do down both sides of the muzzle, but not along the top and the bottom. So I'm going to do just to where his mouth starts there. And I'm going to mop it off. I'm going to do the other side. Again from the corner of his mouth and walk it into the edge. Mop it off. Then I'm going to do under his muzzle. And just under his lip. So while we have the fawn out, we're also going to do the sign with the fawn. We're going to shade it. Okay, so I'm just going to go around it, and I'm going to again walk up to the top edge. Mop it off. And I'm going to go down the sides, get in all those little areas there. Lightly mop it off. And then the other side. Okay, so we've done the first set of shading. Now what we're going to do is we're going to highlight with the warm white. So I'm going to take my warm white and I'm going to use the same brush to highlight. Again, load my brush with the water, tap it off, and just get rid of that excess water on the ferrule and a little bit of water at the base here. So I am going to now go around his head just up here. So start here, go around his head just to above the ear. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to go along the top of his ears, the ear flap here. So just along the top of the ear flap on both ears. Okay, and then we're going to go along the bottom of his ears, just along the bottom here. Okay. I'm just loading my brush a little again. Now we're going to go along the top of his muzzle and the bottom of his muzzle. And then I'm just going to go around the bottom of his mouth. And then I'm going to go along the bottom of the sign. And I'm just going to kind of do it here and there, really quite irregular along the bottom of the sign, and then mop it off. Now I'm going to deepen the shading with asphaltum. So I'm going to take out my asphaltum, and where I've shaded, I'm going to add some asphaltum. You might not want to do it everywhere. If you may have shaded some areas darker than you thought with the fawn, so you may not need to put too much of this of the asphaltum on it. Okay, so I am going to start at the tip here of his ear, and just going to take a little bit of that off. So I'm going to walk it up and then mop it off. And the same thing on the other side. Mop it off. I'd add just a little bit more here, a little bit darker. Mopped it, I lost some of it. Now I'm going to do in asphaltum where the ears touch the head on the ear side. So I'm going to do them right here. Both sides. Okay, under the flaps. Both sides. And you can even add just a little bit along the bottom, just in from where the ear touches the head. I'm just going to add a little bit in there. And I'm going to do it on both sides. Now I'm going to do around his eyes. I like to do around their eyes quite dark because then it really accentuates their eyes. So I'm just going to do around their eyes. Just mop that. Now I'm just going to do under his tongue right here. I'm not going to do down the side because I will be adding the blush there. So I'm just going to a little bit just down here, just a little bit right there. Okay, now we're going to do the sign, and I'm going to switch over to my 1/2 inch Josonia angle. And I'm going to use my asphaltum again. Load up my brush. And I'm going to do along the top. And I'm going to just kind of do it. See how it's just kind of messy? I'm not trying to do it too exact because I want it to look a little rusticy. Now I'm going to do the sides. And when I do the sides, I'm going to wiggle my brush again, like I do for the daisies. And I'm going to walk the paint in. And then just blot it a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to wiggle it, walk it out a little bit. And then just blot it a bit, just lightly blot it. And then your sign should look like that. So now what I want to do is I want to take, go back to the fawn and my 1/4 inch angle. You can use whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Some people like to shade with flat brushes. I prefer to shade with an angle. So I'm just going to go back with a little bit of fawn. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put the toe of it into the fawn and into the asphaltum, and I'm just going to kind of mix them together. Okay, I'm going to do just around the top of the eyelid. And same with this one, just along. So this is the top of the eyelid here. So we did around the outside of the top of the eyelid. So this time we're doing along the bottom of the actual eyelid. Okay. And then take your warm white. And we're going to do along the actual top of the eyelid, just below the shading. Like that. Now I'm going to take some raw sienna. And we're going to add some nice raw sienna to this cow. So I'm just going to use my 3/8 inch angle, my raw sienna. I'm going to load my brush. Don't want it too wet. So make sure you take away some of the moisture if you have too much. And I'm going to just add a little bit of color to the top of the ears. And I'm not being exact. I'm not going all the way up to the top. I'm just kind of randomly adding some color to it. I'm going to go under here, just in some places. And again, you can see how I'm moving my brush. It is not to be perfect and exact. And I'm going to take a little bit more. And I'm going to just put a little bit of it under the muzzle here. And just under the tongue a little bit. A bit around his top of his eyelids. I'm just adding a little bit more color to him. So anywhere you think he might need a little bit more color, you can go ahead and add it. Okay. Now I'm just going to base coat the tongue sugared peach because I did not do that. So I'm just going to there, just a little bit of sugared peach. Now I am going to now take, there's a lot of little things to this. So I'm going to take wild berry. If you don't have wild berry, you can use peony pink. Just any of those really nice, pretty pinky colors. I love wild berry. It's one of my favorite colors. Now I am going to float shade a little bit of wild berry along the top of his eyelid. Just along here, just above his eyes. So, and here, you can mop that off. Okay, and then we're going to do a little bit of it on his tongue, just on the left side of his tongue. Just like that, and then mop that off. I think while I have this out, I am going to add a little bit more color just above his muzzle here. And then I'm going to mop that off. So just take a look at your piece and you can see where you might want to add a little bit more color. Now I'm going to just do a little bit of dry brushing with warm white. So I have more warm white and I'm going to use one of my dome stipple brushes. So I'm just going to get it into the warm white. Work it into the bristles. Really work it in. If you have too much, you can get a piece of dry paper towel and just work it into the dry paper, into the paper towel just to get off any excess. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to dry brush a little bit in the I'm going to dry brush in between his nostrils and on his forehead. And a little bit on his ear. Try to avoid the shaded areas. Okay. I'm just going to take a dry piece of paper towel and just do that. Now we're going to dry brush the cheeks. And I'm going to use Wild Berry. So I'm again going to use a dome stippler. No, actually, I think with this one, I'm going to use my oval dry brush. So I'm going to work the brush into my wild berry. Really load that brush. And then I like to keep rubbing until there's hardly any coming off of it. You can see less and less is coming off. Okay, so now I'm going to go into his cheeks. I'm going to start at the bottom with my brush on the side. Do not dry brush with using the tip of your brush. And I'm just going to very lightly start adding my dry brushing around the outside of each nostril on his muzzle. And then as I'm pressing, I can start adding more pressure until I get it to look how I want it to look. And then I'm going to come over on this side and I'm going to do the same thing. Start off lightly, and then you can increase the pressure. Okay, like that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the eyelashes. So I'm going to take, again, my 18-aught liner. So I'm going to take my lamp black and my 18-aught liner, and I'm going to line in his lashes. And then I'm going to line in his hair. So when you're lining, I like to get my brush really wet in the water, tap it off, take the excess water away from the ferrule. And then just start pulling the color into your brush till it comes to a nice point. And then I'm going to come here and I'm barely going to touch the surface. And I'm just going to sort of curve my brush a little bit. And it's the pressure of your brush to the surface. The more pressure you put on the surface with your brush, the wider your strokes are going to be. So I sort of play a little game with myself. How many times can I do the stroke without touching the surface? And I end up with some really nice, pretty fine eyelashes. I'm going to do it on this side. Always make sure to remove the water from your ferrule. You don't want it to run into your brush. Remember to curve your brush as you're doing it. You'll end up with beautiful eyelashes. Now take your Snow White again. We're just going to float a little bit on his eyeball. So I'm going to just take Now this is Krista's awesome angle brush. It is an 1/8 inch. I love this brush for all these little lines that I want to do. So I'm just going to get a little float on it, and then I'm going to just float these little lines on either side of his eye. Okay, so all I've done is I've floated on either side of his eye, just like that. And then I'm going to take my 18-aught liner and I'm going to dip it into the Snow White. And I'm just going to highlight the edge of it. Like that. Now, if you find you get too much, like it may have a little bit too much white, the float might have been a little bit too big, you can just take a Q-tip, get it just a little damp on the end, and just kind of just shape it into like a half moon. Oh. Little piece of something there. Okay. So that is the eyes, except I'm just going to go around the outside. I just want them to stand out. So I'm going to shape them a little bit. Just with my liner. And I'm going to shape them like this. That just makes them stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to now take my burnt sienna. We're going to add some hair and freckles to this lovely little cow. And I'm just going to use my 18-aught liner again. And I want to just give him some wiggle hair. So I'm just going to line some wiggle hair. He's got crazy hair, this guy. Like that. And then I'm going to take my ball stylus. I'm going to use my smaller one. I can find it. And I'm just going to add freckles with the burnt sienna. So I want to put some freckles up here. I'm going to add some freckles onto his muzzle. And on this side. And add a few onto his ear. Oh. Now, if you have to make a boo-boo, again, just take your Q-tip, there, get rid of it. Okay, so I am just going to add a few onto his ear, and a little bit onto this ear. And then we're just going to finish adding the rest of his hair. So you can just randomly, and you're going to load your brush and apply the paint the same way you did the eyelashes. So you're barely going to touch the surface because you just want these to be really nice and fine. These are just little tufts of hair coming out all over. And you can do it wherever you want. There is no wrong place or right place. I do like to do them coming out of his ears. You can see exactly where I've done them in the pattern. And if you like, you can do them exactly where I've done them, or you can do them where you want to do them. You might want to add a little bit more. You might want to add a little bit less. Just make sure you keep enough water on your brush so you're always loading it. You see, I'm just adding it randomly here and there. And again, I really am barely touching the surface when I do this. I'm just going to add it to the end of his ear. A little bit up here. A little bit on his chin. A little bit to the side of his head if you like. And it's just wherever you want to add it. Gives him character. So I think that's all I'm going to do there. I'm just going to look at it and see if I'm happy with everything, if I want to add a little bit more. Okay, so now we'll go down into the sign, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do the vine around the cow's head. So I'm going to take my brush, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the raw sienna or the burnt sienna to it. You can add either. I just want to add a little bit more color to it. I'm just going to, you can see, I'm just kind of slapping a little bit of float of this burnt sienna on there, just for a little bit more color to it. Now we want these to dry. Okay, now it's dry. We're going to come back up and we're going to put the little wreath around his head. Now you can follow my line drawing, or you can do it freehand, whichever you feel more comfortable with. Now I'm just going to use the 18-aught liner, and I'm going to use Hauser Medium Green. Okay, and I'm going to do one line. So I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to just kind of do a little irregular line. Going around his head. And then just under his ear. You can see I'm not just doing one long straight line. I'm coming around it. Okay, now I'm going to go back over it again with the same Hauser green, and I'm just going to wind some more around it. So there's going to be a little bit more vine around. And then I'm going to have some very fine little vines coming out of it. And these are like the same thickness that you would do the eyelashes. And you can also make some little tiny leaves if you want, and just by using the same liner. And just like make two little lines and then join them. And if there's any spaces in between, just fill it in. So just start at a point with a point and join them. Okay, we're just doing a few. Okay, now after you've done that, we can dot. So I just want to do all the dotting at the same time. So if you just look at your piece, see if there's anything you'd like to change, anything you add, and you want to deepen any of the shading, go ahead. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to start at the top here, and I'm going to do some little wild berries. So have your wild berry and your snow white. Get a little dab of each on your palette paper. And we're going to just start making some little berries. And these are just random. So I try and do them where there's vines and where there's leaves. Just do as many or as few as you want. And we're going to let these dry. And as they're drying, after they're dry, we're going to dot on top of them with some of the snow white. Okay, so while you have your ball stylus out, you can get your lamp black out. I'm going to take my lamp black, and I'm going to draw these daisies now. So they're all dotted the same, just along the shaded side, randomly, just start dotting, and a little bit onto the petals. You don't need too many because we're going to add the galaxy glitter, black hole, which really fills in the gaps and really accentuates these little daisies, makes them look so gorgeous. Okay, so we need all these little dots to dry. Okay, so now that these dots are dry, I'm just going to take my 18-aught liner and I'm going to add his whiskers. So I'm just going to, and I'm doing it very lightly again, hardly any pressure on the surface, and I'm just adding the whiskers. And I'm adding them to either side. Just really nice, fine lines. Okay. And I'm also going to add this little hanger here that goes around the side. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to bring this up to his mouth and down to this side. And then I always like to add little things, you know, little details. So I'm just going to add a few little threads as if it's frayed a little bit. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to do the lettering. Now you can use a a micron pen, whatever you feel comfortable with. If you want, you can use your liner. I'm going to use my liner. And I'm going to write y'all down here. Okay, and then for the welcome, you can use micron pen, you can use your liner. I'm going to use my liner. We'll see how well this works out, won't we? Sometimes I'm really good at it, and then some days it's, you know, not as good. We'll see what I am today. Just kind of keep turning the piece. And again, if you're not comfortable using your brush, use a pen. Turn this and go up like that. Now I'm going to add a little bit more. I want to thicken some of these lines. So I'm just going to thicken some. And if you decide you want to use your pen, you can do this too. You just have to, if you want to thicken one side of them, you can just go back over the lines after you've done the first set. There, turned out better than I thought today. I will, after this is completely dry, I will erase these little white lines that I put on. Just to help guide me. Okay, so I'm just going to let that dry before I erase all those little white lines. I want to add some cute little lines to these daisies. So I'm just going to use Snow White in my liner, and I'm just going to randomly just add a few little lines to them. There. I'm going to get my ball stylus again. Now these ones, these little berry ones have dried. So I am just going to add some little warm whites on top of them, snow white on top of them. Careful not to put it on his freckles. Then you can just add a few extra little white ones randomly around. Okay, so now what I did was I splattered this y'all with lamp black, and I also dotted the letters with lamp black. And you can actually add some little dots up here if you want. So I'm just going to add these little dots here, like that. And then you can take a toothbrush or a splatter brush, and you can just do a little bit of splattering right here. So I'm going to take a toothbrush. Now I have a splatter brush too, but I prefer using a toothbrush, especially in smaller areas, because I can control where it goes better. So I'm just going to get it wet, tap it off, and then I'm going to take away the excess moisture just on a piece of paper towel because I don't want it too dark. And I'm going to just work a little bit of black into this. Now, I don't want this to get all over, so I am just going to cup it. And then I've just got a little bit of black on it, just distresses it a little bit. Now, the little daisies that you see around here on the background, they're the same as the other ones, so I'm just going to quickly show you how to do them. So I'm going to use coral and heritage brick, and I mix them together. Just a little blob of each. Mix them together. Just mix them together really good. And then we're just going to blot anywhere you want around here. Just little dots. And these are going to be the centers of the daisies that you see in the background. This one's a little bigger. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to just take my snow white, and we're just going to make the little petals that go around it. Now, if you don't want to wait until the centers are finished, you can just turn your board so that you don't smudge the ones that are all still wet. I usually do like 5 around, different shapes, different sizes. They're not evenly spaced, nothing. I like these to look randomy. I don't want them to look perfect. Just keep turning your board, and then you don't have to worry about smudging ones that aren't quite dry. There you are. So that's those ones. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my black my black hole galaxy glitter. I'm going to shake it up. I'm just going to use the lid, and I'm going to dip a Q-tip again into it. Let's get some on here. And then I'm just going to apply a little bit here and there, and a little bit onto the top of the daisy petals, just on the base. All three here. And I like using the Q-tip again, because I can really direct where it goes. I can throw this away, my brushes don't get wrecked, and my water doesn't get ruined. So that's it. And that is how you do Welcome Y'all. Thank you so much for watching this series. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to purchase the pattern that has all three of these plus the tags, I'm not going to show you how to do the tags because the pattern is in there, and they're exactly the same as what I've just showed you on all three. So they're super easy to paint just by looking back at these videos. Again, thank you for coming. You can purchase the set. It's called Little Spring Things. It's in my Etsy shop. These videos are going to be going up on my Facebook page. They will also be going in my YouTube channel. So I'll be posting them all up in there tonight, and then you can watch them anytime at your leisure. Thanks again. Bye-bye.